Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge from Boulder, Colorado. I'm Jon Najarian. Pete will be joining me shortly to break down the earnings that are going to be streaming our way from now for the next several weeks. And there are some good and some bad. We'll have both right here on the Rebel's Edge. Bang. Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. He is, of course, Pete Najarian. I'm Jon Najarian, and I was going to be out here on this on the deck here at the hotel, Pete, but all of a sudden, of course, 10 seconds after we started, I've got some guy out there with a freaking weed whacker.
That's like me when I was out in California, John, and everything was hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden they had a cement truck about 100 yards away from me go spinning away. I was like, oh, this is just great.
Well, folks, on the Rebel's Edge, we break down macro minute, and we give it a minute. We don't give it a whole 30 minutes because most of the guys on TV, they want to spend 30 minutes talking about nothing. We aren't going to do that. We're going to dive right into macro right now. And I'm going to say, Pete, it's China. Their recent economic data indicates a further slowdown. That's not what the world wants to hear. It's not what anybody except China haters want to hear, because that puts demands on things like oil down. It puts demands on all kinds of materials and mining stuff down, because China's a massive consumer of that stuff. So I'm going to say once again, Pete, macro, China.
Yep. Well, and last week we had PCI, we had all these different things, PPI and everything else, and we got through that. But now it really, truly does become the focus on earnings, John, from a macro perspective right now. And we've actually pushed that out a little bit to tomorrow. Not much today. But you go back to last week. Why were we up 400 points on the Dow? Well, because the financials absolutely crushed it. And all of those financials were moved to the upside. That's why that XLF was up 2% last Friday. I'm looking for even more of that, John. We've got a lot more from the banks coming at us come tomorrow. I think that from a macro perspective is going to carry the markets as well, as long as they can deliver the way we just saw last week.
Well, Pete, I'm going to dive right into the futures, and I'm going to say Bitcoin futures. I'm sure you're not surprised. But Bitcoin went through 63,000, 64,000. Now it's through 65,000 and looking like it's making an assault on 66,000. And if you want to know why, well, I'll give you a couple reasons, Pete, why you might be seeing such a big surge here. One, we've got a pretty significant global geopolitical, I'll say, risks out there on the table. Number two, the candidate who totally supports Bitcoin, that's President Trump, opens up his biggest lead of the election cycle right now. He's approaching 55%. That's based on all the swing states that he holds solidly right now. And since one of those candidates, Vice President Harris, does not like crypto, she only likes central bank digital currencies, CBDC. And if you know what you're talking about, you won't want CBDCs, folks. You want something that is decentralized like Bitcoin. And I think this is one of the drivers for Bitcoin today, Pete.
You know, and Bitcoin, I'll tell you what, John, it's volatile, but to your point, I mean, late last week, we were looking at 60,000 and we got up 64,000. We eased back to 59,000. And next thing you know, here we are, like you said, closer to 66,000 once again. That's a lot of moving, and that moving, the most of that movement is giving us in the right direction to the upside. So to your point, yeah, Bitcoin is moving and moving in a big way to the upside. And some of the political things that come along with it, obviously, like you were just talking about with President Trump. I'm still looking at the VIX. We've been at 23. We've been down to 20. We haven't been able to pull back underneath 20 for any sustained amount of time. But just remember this. We started off October at 17. We have pushed up, but today we're sitting a little closer to 20. By the way, today I expected very little volume, John. Completely wrong. Completely wrong. The unusual options are coming at us like crazy. And I was thinking, well, with part of this Columbus Day and some of the other things that are going on, maybe we'd get a little bit lighter. That ain't the case. People are really, really active today. The Dow is up, the S&P is up, the NASDAQ has been up and cruising to the upside.
Well, and Pete, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish our Canadian viewers happy Canadian Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Because the U.S., we celebrate Thanksgiving the fourth Thursday in November. So it could be a different day every year rather, and it is a different day every year. This year it'll be the 28th. Well, Canadians, Pete, celebrate Thanksgiving on the second Monday in October, and this is that. So for all those Canadians who are going to be enjoying hash and roast beast, and I think it's a walrus pudding, Pete, or something like that. Pete and I celebrate with you and say, yeah, enjoy all of that stuff, guys. We'll take our turkey instead of that walrus pudding.
And some pumpkin pie.
And some pumpkin pie, that's right. All right, SoFi Technologies announced a $2 billion loan platform with Fortress, Pete. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, the stock pops at least 10% today. Take a look at this unusual activity too, folks, because once again, the heat seeker finds with the stock trading $9, 10,000 upside calls all the way out in January. Well, stock's up 9% right now, and perhaps going a lot higher. And this is great news for SoFi, and it makes their lending a lot easier, and it makes our calls a lot juicier.
Yeah, absolutely it does, John. And I'll tell you what, with SoFi up close to 10%, somewhere very close to that anyway. I know the 1050 is the 52-week high, and it was pushing close to that. It was in the upper nines, pushing towards 10. Heavy volume, pretty interesting. The $2 billion that is part of the Fortress investment, that really does open things up, I think, a little bit more for SoFi. Plus, you take a look at that huge short interest. There's some squeezing going on there, John. They're 17 to 18% short in this stock. So when you get a move like this, it gets extended even a little bit more, and maybe even into tomorrow. We'll see. But with this news, certainly very good news for SoFi. This is a heck of a move to the upside and pressing on those 52-week highs.
Well, very impressive as well, Pete, this move that we're seeing. And like I say, I don't think this is a one and done, folks. No. I would say you want to ride this one. All right, let's talk about Boeing. Boeing lurches from one crisis to the next, Pete. And you and I were talking before we came on air about why that might be. You know, they used to build their planes in Spokane, Washington, and then they kind of outsourced it to, not outsourced it completely, but they used Spirit Aerosystems. They used builders that were non-union, I believe, out in Carolina and things, Pete. And that may be at the heart of this. I don't know, but I will tell you this. They have a machinist strike that's affecting 33,000 workers. They employ about 170,000 workers. And the CEO says she's going to have to furlough about 17,000 of those. So this is not good for Boeing. And this is one, Pete, where we probably should have some shorts on, right?
Yeah, well, when you look at this, John, take a look at the year-to-date, what this stock has done. It was trading up there at 250. Now we're at 148. We actually hit a 52-week low today of 146. Everything that you look at looks like a negative, right? I mean, whether it's the striking workers or the workers are going to get laid off, or, you know, they're postponing deliveries of the 777X, or the fact that the 737 MAX is not always able to get out when they expect it, and they're going to try to work on that as well. The jobs cuts of 10% and all the rest of it, John, there is nothing you can find right now that tells you, hey, Boeing is probably going to bounce. This thing has really gotten hit. No, you're not seeing anything to indicate that there's any opportunity for that. And by the way, you never need to hit the absolute bottom and say, hey, I bought the bottom. That's all for ego. When you look at what Boeing is doing, they've gone through CEO after CEO. They've had issues now for many, many years going forward. This is a company that's absolutely in disarray. They've got all kinds of issues. I'm sure you're going to see the lawsuits and everything else that comes with it. This is one where I think it's a don't touch. You wait, and you wait for something very, very prevalent to happen that looks like it's going to maybe make a turn that's not just for a day. Maybe it's a turn for a year. But for right now, this is one of those where you just got to back away. They have too many problems to deal with right now. And I don't know if there's a worse company out there right now that's got the kind of market cap this one does. than Boeing. Boeing is at the bottom of the barrel.
They used to always talk, Pete, about the backlog. Oh, yeah, but they have a $5 billion. They have a $7 billion. They have a $10 billion backlog. In other words, orders for planes and things like that. That hasn't helped them.
No.
That might be something that some analysts hang their hats on, but not us.
Right.
All right, Pete, MicroStrategy. Michael Saylor continues to just kill it here. Of course, Bitcoin trading through 65,000 and pushing towards 66. Yeah, that's a good reason why the stock's hitting an all-time high today. Also, Barclays giving them a big upgrade. They continue to buy Bitcoins, and when he buys, Pete, he buys like 1,000 or 7,500, which is what he just bought, 7,420 new Bitcoins. So that brings his total to over 250,000 Bitcoins. It's amazing. And this stock fresh all-time highs.
Right. And you know, the strange part about this, John, is the fact that it's going up for all the right reasons, but it's going up because of this Bitcoin investment that we're seeing for Michael Saylor, as you said, 252,000 Bitcoin. And they just bought the 7,400, as you just mentioned as well. I mean, everywhere you look, it's incredible. Barclays is actually moving along pretty nicely with this one, but it's not as aggressive as it looks because they basically had a price target, John, of 173. Now it's 2.25. Well, the stock today hit brand new highs at 227. So is Barclays going to have to react again, maybe in the next month or two? Possibly. It all will depend on how Bitcoin continues this move. Will it continue this move to the upside? Michael Saylor is absolutely committed to this whole thing, as you and I both know, and that is what's pushing this stock to the upside. It's not about MicroStrategy, the company, nearly as much as the investment side that we're seeing. And it's been absolutely incredible. And he's been right. He's been right. And he's been right. So he's one of those guys that I think, as opposed to Boeing, I'd rather ride with MicroStrategy at this point in time.
Yeah, well, and the stock gave back a lot after that big jump, Pete. Yeah. But I want to show people just real quick the unusual activity that we had, because we had several cases of it. With the stock at 198, which was just last week, somebody bought 16,000. That's 1.6 million share equivalent of MicroStrategy. So that's a huge bet back then. Well, those calls doubled today, Pete. They went from $3.82 to over $7 today. So another reason, folks, that you guys should be subscribing to marketrebellion.com/get started. Because you could definitely, if you could use a little more ching in your account, cha-ching, well, that's one way to get it. Yeah. All right. Lastly, Pete, Sirius satellite radio, Warren Buffett, he now owns 108 million shares of the satellite radio company. That's a 32% stake. Wow, is what I'm going to say, Pete. Wow. And I guess about 3.6 million shares was the recent acquisition, but if you already have 108 mil, I'm guessing he might just want to take it private, Pete, because why not? It's got no competition. There were only 2 satellite licenses for this kind of terrestrial or up there in the sky radio, and they own both XM and Sirius. So we had unusual in this one, Pete. Paid off pretty big also. They were buying the October 30 calls when the stock was 25. Today it trades through 27 on Buffett's adding to his position.
Yeah, and anytime it's Warren Buffett, John, you always have to take note. You just do, because we all know what a great investor the man is. He also backs his way into a lot of these companies by buying the options first and then starting to release how much he's doing on the stock side, and suddenly you get that extra push to the upside. But this is a stock that's up, almost 8% today. It is way off 52-week highs. So is this an area where you'd want to be buying if you really believe in this company? I would say absolutely yes. And you're just following Warren Buffett along with what he's been doing. Like you said, John, he's got 32% of the stock that's out there. That's a very, very big bite. He's also got 4.5% yield that you're getting out of this thing. That's not so bad. And even though they're not absolutely crushing it in any way, they still sit at a very reasonable PE level, something close to a 7 or an 8. typical type of stock that a guy like Warren Buffett likes. He likes that yield. He likes the fact that it's priced at a fair price, and he's got a big chunk of it, John. If you own a third of a company, I'd say that you're thinking about maybe saying, let's just take the whole damn thing and we'll take it.
Yep, I think that's going to happen, Pete. I don't know if it goes a lot higher than this, folks.
No.
I mean, maybe he takes the whole thing out at 30 or 31. I don't think it's a 40 number or anything like that, but we'll see. It's a monopoly, and Warren loves monopolies.
Yeah.
A lot of people are against him. Warren loves monopolies. All right, Pete, let's take a look at your Cowboys.
Because good Lord.
State of the Dallas. Pete, I saw Jerry Jones, who's, Pete and I would say a friend of ours. Saw him walking through the halls down there in the stadium. Not a word. Not a word. His whole group that they're walking down there to the locker room. I mean, this was an old-fashioned ass whooping.
Right.
But take a look at this, folks, and let us know what you think via NFL on Fox.
Looks like some confusion. Look at those fans all fired. He is not performing as a guy who just got paid to perform, by the way, either, John. I mean, that's been part of the problem.
No. And now with the burden of Lamb and him, Pete, on that payroll, how are they going to get anybody else?
Right. Can't fit
how
him
do
in.
they sign, Micah Parsons and all these guys? How do they sign all these guys?
Right. And the other problem too, John, that defense is beat up right now. And so that just adds insult to injury, of course. But I mean, when you look at that defense right now, Micah Parsons, he was hurt. One of the big defensive ends, he's hurt. When you look at in the secondary as well as the linebackers, they're hurt. So they've got too many people injured at the same time. They've got so much money into two players, as you just were pointing out. I don't know. I think Jerry maybe didn't quite see it the way that a lot of us are seeing it, as far as what do they really need to do? Who do they really need to pay? And did they need to give the amount of money that they have to some of the folks that they've got? I don't know, John. It's a difficult thing. Obviously, it's not easy, but I will say the Cowboys do not look like America's team right now. There's no doubt about that. Detroit actually looks like America's team.
Yeah. Look at how similar those colors are, too.
Yeah. Those uniforms looked great yesterday. They were wearing the all white. The only thing they had that wasn't was the helmets in the silver and blue, and that looked great, too. So it was fun watching it. I'm not even going to hit the NFL today, John. I wanted to hit a couple other things. How about this?
Okay.
So we always used to use the expression, welcome to the whatever, right? Like when you came to a big university, they're like, welcome to Alabama, boy, and they hit you, right? And they hit you pretty damn hard because you're coming out of high school and it kind of wakes you up to where you are. Well, how about this? Welcome to the Big Ten, USC. Welcome to the Big Ten, UCLA. John, their combined record right now is 1-6 in the Big Ten. The two Southern California schools that went to the Big Ten, they are 1-6 against Big Ten competition. And you could go to 1-7 if you included Oregon, but you really can't do that because Oregon came in the package as well that brought Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. So Oregon whooped UCLA, by the way. But Washington right now, they're 2-2, so they're 500. Oregon is 3-0. Oregon's top two team in the country right now in terms of record. What they're looking at right now, they're undefeated. They look unbelievable. And then you've got somebody like UCLA who right now, John, they are at the absolute bottom of the Big Ten. And it's pretty interesting to see how the mighty have fallen, so to speak. And we've talked about that at other times as well. But the top five right now, you've got 3 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams, John. That's what you're looking at for the top 5. Now, we've expanded this thing, so it's going to be really interesting. There are going to be I'll challenge you with this one. John, will anybody be undefeated, including Texas? Will anybody be undefeated when the season is over before you start going into the playoff hunt?
I got to say no, Pete. I don't think so. But what works against Texas in that regard is the later you lose, the more likely it is you don't even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now, there are exceptions. You could lose a very, very close game to, the number 2 in the nation and still make it in or something like that. But if you, have a misstep, and teams do have missteps quite frequently, where you've got a flat, you come out flat because you're looking ahead to the next week or looking ahead to the playoffs or whatever, and you miss because the other team's fired up. I mean, look at Vandy.
Yeah.
What did Saban say, Pete? Saban says, well, that's one place you never worry about playing at.
They needed to worry.
Maybe they should have.
You can't blame Saban for that comment at all, but it just shows you, that any given Sunday, I mean, and in this case, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Thursday, whatever day, because we know right now we're in that period of time, John, where every single day there is a game on TV. It's either a college or an NFL game, but every single day from here all the way, I think, to the end of November or something like that. It's some amazing stat that guys love to put out there. How about baseball, John? We've got Major League Baseball. We got the National League. We got the American League. The National League already had their first game. The Dodgers beat the living tar out of the Mets. They beat them 9-0. And you know why? Because the guy that you and I have been on for multiple years now doing what we do here, we've talked about Shohei Ohtani a ton. And we've talked about if he comes to a stadium near you, you owe it to yourself to see modern day the best player in all of baseball. Now, you can say, well, Pete, what about this guy back in 1950? I'm not talking about that. But when you see Ohtani play, this guy is great in everything that he touches. He's 6'4", 230-pound guy. He hits the ball 550 feet. Here's his stats, John. He's a 300 hitter, 310. He's got 130 RBIs. He's got 54 home runs, and 59 stolen bases. I mean, he has put this up here where I don't know if I can see anybody, obviously the future, you never know, anything like what he's been able to do in a short period of time. This is his best year, and he didn't even pitch this year. And the guy has done it all, and it's amazing. And then now we're going to have their game tonight, but we're also going to have the Yankee game. And I guess the question I have is, which would be more fun to you? To have a Subway Series, Mets-Yankees, or the Yankees-Dodgers going across the country back and forth for this, what would you think is the more fun? I don't even know. I don't know. I think it's cool when you can get the Subway thing going, but there's something about LA and New York going at each other. They hate each other to some degree, anyway. So what do you think? What do you prefer?
Well, Stevie Cohen, our friend, Pete, isn't going to like it, but I'd like to see that coast to coast. I'd like to see LA versus New York. On the other hand, whatever Diaz and the trumpet playing as he comes out onto the field, for the save, I love that, the theater of that. That's fantastic. 3 of the teams in here, folks, are the 3 highest payrolls in baseball. The Yankees, the Mets, and the Dodgers. The Guardians, I think it is. I think I called them Gladiators once before.
Well, they changed these names, John, because of political correctness and whatever.
The Cleveland Guardians have a payroll of 108 mil. The other 3 are close to 300 mil. So it's kind of like, So the Yankees versus the Guardians, obviously the Guardians have a shot, but nobody in TVdom wants to see them beat the Yankees. That, if there was a fix, and I think occasionally there are fixes that go in, Pete, I would say the fix should be for the Yankees. Now, of those other 2, I think both are going to draw tremendously, Dodgers and Mets. So it won't matter who is the winner of that series in terms of TV audience, but a big deal difference on the Cleveland Guardians versus the New York Yankees and Aaron Judge.
Last thing, John, this is just the one I'm going to add real quick just for fun anyway. The Minnesota Twins, I'm in Minnesota. The Minnesota Twins they basically, the owner said, you know what, we're out. We've had a great run. 1984, we bought the team for $44 million. That's $44 million. They now want to sell it, and it's going to go probably north of $1.5 billion. Now, that's nothing compared to the NFL. It's nothing compared to the NBA and all the rest of it. But who do you think would be who would make the most sense as a buyer? Is there anybody that comes to mind for you, John? And I say that by saying I think it should be somebody who lives locally. Baseball is different than football. The Wilfs own the Vikings, and they're here every game. They're at every game that there is, but they're not here. They're from New Jersey, right? But it works okay. There's only the 17 games plus playoffs. But with baseball, you kind of need to have an owner, I think, who knows a little something about the cities and all the rest of it and, all of that. So I'm just curious. I've got one in mind, but what about you? Do you got anybody?
I've got the same one, I bet. The owner of Cambria.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Marty Davis. Yeah.
I think Mr. Davis would be a great owner for the Twins. I think it would be a great investment for him because even though baseball doesn't share TV revenue, folks.
Right. It's a problem.
And that's a mistake. That will change over time eventually. And when it does, that team's worth $3 billion, Pete. Not $1.5 billion. But who knows how long that takes? Is it a decade off or whatever? But this guy, folks, is, the family, self-made. They took whey, which is a byproduct in milk, and they used to throw it away, literally away. Pun is intended. And now they made billions selling whey as a protein. Basically powderized it, sold it as protein. Boom. Then they have Cambria. Then they bought Sun Country. I mean, what doesn't that family own now, Pete? They can easily take them down.
They got a really good number for the whey company, John. I want to say it was something in the $6 billion range when they sold that. I don't know what they sold Sun Country for, but they sold that just a couple of years ago, and they still have Cambria, right? So. Yeah. And Cambria is big, really, really, really big. It's them or that family, at least, or maybe the Cargills. People don't know Minnesota well enough. There are some very, very wealthy Minnesotans out there. And you know what? I think it should be somebody who is in the Twin Cities that should be the owners. And the Pohlads did a great job at times, but they didn't want to use the money, John. They did not want to spend the money. This year, they had a heck of a good run going into September. In September, they lost, I think, something like 80% of their games in the month of September. They didn't do anything at the trade deadline and all the rest of it. The whole thing imploded. I mean, we were looking at the playoffs and sniffing towards the playoffs, not far from the Guardians or the whoever you said they were.
Gladiators.
But they just collapsed. They absolutely collapsed. And then it came out just the other day that they're going up for sale. So it'll be interesting to see who actually, gets a hold of them. It could be the two guys that are trying to buy the Timberwolves, and they haven't been able to execute that. And at least you've got a guy from baseball as part of that whole deal too. So A-Rod. So, who knows? It could be interesting.
Yeah. Well, folks, thank you for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, you can always check out our subscriptions where you could be trading the same kind of stocks Pete and I are trading and all of our subscribers. If you go to marketrebellion.com/get started, you can see about coaching, mentoring, education, financial literacy, and those subscriptions, all on that site, marketrebellion.com/get started. All right, Pete, I'll see you tomorrow. See everybody at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.